Hey, Brian, you just muted the music when you muted your mic. And we're back with the Texas Oil and Gas Podcast. We appreciate you tuning in to today's episode. This is episode 214. Episode 214. I'm your host, Josh Shelton, friend and co-host Ryan Ray with me today. Ryan, we have a lot to jump into today, earnings reports and a lot to look at. How's your week starting so far?
Well, if I could figure out how to work the ones and twos over here, as they like to say, that'd be a nice help. I always forget that I mute my mic on this thing, it mutes it through that thing. I mute it over here, it's anyways. So, but it's been good, Josh. I actually have a little bit of news to share. So as you know, we talked about on the podcast some, I believe, when I sold my stake in R-Squared Global. I don't know, a few months back now. Anyways, and so I launched Ray Global Advisors, and so since then, Ray Global Advisors has been working on client acquisition, and we're pleased to announce another client that we picked up today. You can follow some of us on LinkedIn, which is Jubilee Royalty, which I'm an investor in as well. So invested in them in Fund 1, and in Fund 2, they have brought me on in Ray Global Advisors to be the VP of Media Relations. So excited to work with those folks. And if you're an accredited investor looking to invest in a royalty fund, holla at your boy. So a lot of stuff coming down that way. So, and we have some more stuff at Ray Global Advisors that we're getting ready to hopefully announce here in the coming weeks as well. So, good start to the day. Other than that, man, it's been rainy here where we're at, so it's kind of knocked that heat off some. We came home yesterday from church, and it was like, oh gosh, 100 when we left. By the time I got home, it was like 79 because the rain was pouring down. So it was beautiful.
Yeah, it was nice. Yeah, I didn't have to run the AC quite so hard last night. So Ryan, last week we had mentioned we had some earnings reports that were going to be coming out this week, and just wanted to jump in to just kind of get a snapshot of the industry so far. So the first article is going to be the two big boys, Chevron, Exxon earnings top estimates amid recovery in oil and gas prices. So both the companies reported profits for the second straight quarter. Drilling has been increasing, prices have been increasing, and so these two companies have been able to really get their companies moving in the right direction. So it's good to see for these companies. Hopefully, a lot of the mid-size and smaller guys are also able to turn a profit. We're going to see one here in just a minute that is not having a great year despite all of the increases in prices and production.
Yeah, and the other thing is Chevron is reinstating its repurchase program. So that kind of tells you that they believe that not only are these past two quarters going to be good, but the future quarters will be well or go well for them as well. So, that's as we sit here midway through 2021, they're pretty confident about it. And we talked last week about the Delta variant and kind of how that might impact demand. A signal like this is good for at least their belief on where demand will be moving into the fall and winter. It's going to say fall and winter when we're like in the middle of the summer, but I don't know. For me, in my mind, August is like the turnover. You can almost expect fall coming, but we still have a little way to go.
Yeah. So Ryan, at this point, what would we say about Oxy, Chevron? Who was the winner in that deal? I think I'm certainly leaning towards Chevron at this point. They get the $1 billion not to buy it, and then they don't have to deal with all the fallout from the COVID. But they dealt with it, but they didn't have to deal with it after being so bloated, I would say, with extra debts and things. But I wouldn't say that Oxy is necessarily in a bad position either. I mean, their stock prices are at 26. Articles about some of their cash flow has been good. The question is going to be, I'd like to see their earnings report. I don't think it is out yet, but always curious to see, over time, who is going to be the winner in that deal. Right now, I'd certainly lean towards Chevron.
Well, okay, right. So you have to profit $1 billion for Oxy to win on that deal, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be the first step. So you'd have to take $1 billion and profit on it. Make profit on it for Oxy to be considered to win. And then you'd have to say, well, what did Exxon do with that extra $1 billion? And then if they made profit on that, you'd have to tack that on to the $1 billion that Oxy potentially made earnings on. So that's kind of how you'd have to look at it. And I don't have those answers. I'm with you. I tend to think Chevron's probably in a better spot right now, probably more happy with their decision because they have $1 billion if they want to invest in distressed assets right now, right? So they could have went through last year and looked at it, or they could have invested in something else or whatever. So I think.
Well, I guess one of the curiosities would be, if Chevron had bought Anadarko, would they be regretting it now, just from a standpoint of adding on those debts? I'm sure they would have been able to maintain it being as big as they are, but I wonder if it would have improved or decreased their margins right now. That's kind of the angle that I'm also interested in. Just to think, are they really glad that they didn't get it? Putting the $1 billion aside, are they happy that that deal didn't go through? And I think they are. I think they are.
Yeah, well, when they buy it actually for less than these deals, it's like drafting a first round quarterback. You draft him, and then it takes 2 or 3 years to kind of figure out how he shapes up, and then maybe he gets re-signed, and so then you're 4, 5, 6 years in the deal. So 7, 8 years from now, if this is a complete and utter flop for Oxy, then we'll look back and say, obviously, it's a terrible deal. But it'll probably take that long before we really get a good grasp on how this shaked out.
All right, so I mentioned another company. So Pioneer Natural Resources, they're warning of an $832 million loss for the quarter. They're expected to report a total net loss on derivatives of about $1.5 billion for the first half of the year. So take the story of Chevron and say the opposite. And Exxon, that's bad numbers, man. So they looked at sales. Oil prices were above 40, and that first half of 2020 just sent them reeling. And I don't know why they're not able to turn a profit this year. I don't know if they just were overextended. But that's not good for Pioneer, man.
Well, it looks like their losses are going to come from their hedges, right? And so if so let's see here. The loss many producers locked in sales price were above 40, but now face losses as prices jump to 70. So we'll see how it shakes out, because I'm curious if they're saying that they're actually going to take a real loss, as in they didn't make much money, or they took a potential loss, which obviously it's not potential now. We know it. But so if they hedged at 50 and priced at 70, that $20 a barrel loss, it's a real loss in the sense of if you didn't hedge, you could have made it, but it's also not the same.
But not an actual. They didn't lose.
They didn't actually lose money. Yeah, so it's weird because they did, but they also didn't. So it goes both ways.
Well, so when it talks about a net loss, I guess if it means a net loss in derivatives, it would be slightly different. Yeah, but the earnings report is going to be the thing to look at. So that's supposed to be coming out today, I believe. Yeah, so this is just an article about potentially what that's going to say.
Right. And if for somehow it looks, here's the weird thing: if it looks better than what those numbers are saying, then their stock will go up, right?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
Everyone's like, well, they should have lost $830 million, and they come in and they go, well, we only lost $400 million on the potential hedges. They're like, oh well, you cut it in half. So
great news.
We'll see how they cover it next week.
It's all about managing expectations. That's if you're going to have a bad meeting, what you need to do is prepare for it. Send out a memo that the worst meeting ever is coming up, and when you get there, it's just averagely bad. It's good news. So
you go to the Donald Trump school of negotiation, right? Set the bar way out here.
Exactly. You call him Rocket Man, and then you meet with him. So, what'd you say?
Oh no, exactly. Yeah.
So, our good friend David Blackman, he had an interesting article that I wanted to jump into. So, and this is before we have a couple of other things I wanted to talk about. His article is titled "Forget About Peak Oil. We haven't even reached peak coal yet." Now, I thought that was interesting because obviously I'm a big proponent of us not being at peak oil. That oil demand we're far from the climax, the maximum or the what I would project to be what we're going to be at in say 10 years. But I've actually considered that coal is something that, from a third world perspective, if you're talking about countries like Africa and these areas that are developing, obviously coal is a viable solution that might have increased international demand. But the way the question is posed and the way these, the ice storms, the way they happened recently, it makes me wonder if we're even at peak coal in the U.S. Because I'm wondering if they're gonna. If you remember, Blackman talked about them bringing in some more coal to offset. Winterizing these places was one option, but also bringing in more coal. So just this interesting concept. What is left for coal in the U.S.?
Yeah, I think coal in the U.S. is not dead, but it's stage 4 cancer. I think it's it's got a lot. Now that's if you're talking about burning it in new plants and stuff like that. You're talking about exporting it. I think there's potential there because, to your point, and what David makes in the article is you have Asia, Africa, and even Europe. There's spots where they're increasing their base load by using coal, and so I think those are all things to consider. And so we are in a post-industrialized nation in the U.S., and it's very hard for us to sit around and think about all of the things that we have and how that works downstream for emerging markets, third world nations, as they move their way towards first world status. And so, because I'm looking outside my front yard right now, I can see houses and fences and trash and all of this stuff, trash cans and all this stuff. That doesn't just get here on its own. That's a very long and arduous process, and it requires a lot of energy to pull that off. And so the fact that we see this stuff, we kind of take it for granted because we live in it. But if you go to, I've been to some pretty rough spots in Honduras and Nicaragua. If you go to those spots and then you try to say, well, how do you get from there, where everyone's in extreme poverty, to where I live at? It's not very clear how you do that. And so, but coal is going to be, in some of those countries, definitely a player. So Blackman's right. We're nowhere near peak oil. As for peak coal, I think he's right there too. Especially look at China. They don't seem to be. Their Belt and Road stuff, I think they've kind of slacked off on investing in coal plants for there. But as far as domestic usage, I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, and I think that it's just from an economics perspective in the U.S., coal and the ability for these U.S. companies to produce coal and then export it, that seems to be a viable industry. That seems to be something that could increase for years to come. So that's good news for some of the people in the coal industry, because even if the green movement is pushing against it here, it's still a viable option for these countries that are, like you said, trying to come out of poverty. So,
and that real quick, I don't know if we mentioned it recently, but when we talk about energy policy, that's the problem. Is you have to be careful because U.S. talking about energy policy, we usually put pressure on these emerging markets to kind of follow what we're doing, and they're not in the same spot as us. And so, if you talk to these leaders in Africa, they get quite frustrated that we're wanting to end oil and gas just as they're getting into the business for some of these countries, and they need this cheap energy to get to where we're at. So, yeah, agreed 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just frustrating. These countries that are on the verge of being able to escape poverty are, in some cases, being held in poverty by people that want them to use cleaner energy, and they don't. They need any energy. They need cheap energy. Period. Not necessarily what we would deem clean. So Ryan, there's an article that I say article. It's not an article. There was some information that I saw, and I was curious your take on it. So this really reminded me of what Dr. Anas talked about on our show. So the information I have basically said that I think it came out of Bloomberg. There was a OPEC survey done by Bloomberg, and 7 out of 13 nations in the cartel were unable to increase production in July, despite the higher quotas. So one of the things that Anas said, and I may be misquoting him here, so this is just something that kind of vaguely I remember him saying, that when it comes time for us to increase production up to a certain level, we're not actually going to be able to do it immediately. Like we're going to say, hey, we need 20 million barrels of oil, but we're not going to be able to produce that because everything's going offline. When just because they raise the quota doesn't mean everybody's actually going to be able to meet it. And so as we see this happen, do you think this is going to lead to? Do you think this is going to be something that will be quickly overcome, or do you see this as possibly leading to even higher oil prices?
Okay, I've got mixed feelings on this. So yes, you do have OPEC members who cannot increase production, right? And because of a lot of reasons, but some have plenty of spare capacity. The Saudis, for one. Then you look at the U.S., and I think we got a story about the rig count fell or leveled off. Okay, well, the U.S. can increase production, taking the federal land issue aside, anytime it wants to by infusing capital into these companies, and these companies going out securing leases, right? So, that's how it works here. In the foreign countries, it works a little bit differently because they're state owned. So in the U.S., we're not seeing the increase in drilling for a lot of reasons. However, if prices got up to $150 a barrel, that goes away, right? There are people who would start investing in the U.S. Drilling programs at $150 oil. It just would happen. And so you would see U.S. production start to rise pretty quickly. Aside from that, $150 oil means that companies are incentivized to figure out ways to get all these other barrels to the market. So, in these OPEC nations, in Iraq and Iran, Iran's a little bit different because sanctions, but Venezuela, all of these people are going to try to get their barrels to market. Furthermore, companies are going to invest money to find new spots for oil. So if you had $150 oil for 2 years, let's just say, Exxon, Chevron, all these guys would be throwing in hundreds of millions or billions or whatever it is of dollars trying to find new plays to go develop and capitalize on those deals as quickly as possible and get those barrels on the market as quickly as possible. So as the old saying goes, the best cure for high prices is high prices. The other thing that would happen if you had long-term sustained high prices is people would figure out different ways to not use oil and gas. So, me and my wife both have a car. Well, at $150 oil, we might go down to one car because, dude, we can't afford gas for 2 cars. Or people in the big city who are driving might bus. So you would see the market respond all kinds of different ways to mitigate it. So you'd see oil companies figure out ways to increase production or find new plays. On the flip side, you'd figure out consumers would figure out ways to reduce their dependency on gasoline in this case to lower their costs. And so I think that's where, if you look at how much spare capacity is actually there, what would happen if it plays out? I think that's how it plays out because consumers let's just go even higher. Let's say it goes to $250 a barrel. Consumers just can't afford that long term. We just can't afford $250 oil. You think about the price of your milk, your eggs, your lettuce, your beef, all that stuff just goes crazy high. So you can't afford it. And so the oil and gas companies would be incentivized to find a way to capitalize on it, which would bring the price down, and consumers would spend less. So there's a lot of reasons I don't think that type of price would go up, would stay there that long. Now, if you have some kind of shortage because of a constraint in the pipeline issue, that's different. But just from a production standpoint, I do believe that would be kind of how it plays out. I can't imagine U.S. investors not investing in $150 oil in U.S. companies.
Right. Yeah. So, so just looking at it from this perspective as well. So when I said that, just as a clarification, the overall OPEP output did increase because of the Saudi output.
Saudis, right?
Yeah. So what you're saying there is that the Saudis it was taken care of by the Saudis.
And the Saudis have more room to go.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I think that being the point, the question of at what point would oil have to hit in order for the existing production companies not to be able to fill in any lag in output? Because I think there's a possibility you could see oil get pushed up a little, but I think you're right overall that and I think Anas would agree as well that it doesn't have to go up much for companies to pull it back down. It doesn't take a lot. I don't see it getting up to 100, honestly.
Well, I mean, let's just maybe take a few industries here and see how this might play out. If you're in the real estate business and you're showing houses, right, as a realtor, and gasoline is $6 a barrel. You're going to be more inclined to go and to do a 3D tour of the house and put that online and say, if you want to see this thing, you got to pay me to get in the door because I can't go show this house 400 times. Consequently, the people who are in the lower income, the $150,000, $200,000 houses, they can't afford to go drive to look at 15 houses, right? They're on a tight budget. So they don't want to do that either. So you would see the market would respond in a lot of different ways. And that's why I'm saying it's a good thing. I just think that when we project out these high prices, it would be tough on the consumer, it'd be tough on your average person, and they would have to respond in unique ways. People would tell their boss, I can't afford to drive to work. So you give me a raise, let me work from home. So all these things would come in. How much demand did that really take off? I don't know, but I think you would see demand come off some because people just would say we can't afford extremely high prices for this long, especially right now. Let's don't forget that most people are struggling because of what happened last year and the inflation as a result of it. So I don't think we could handle as a world $150 oil.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so another thing I got here, Ryan, was according to TSA data, number of people flying in the U.S. Hit a high of 2.23 million. So since the first time the pandemic started, the last 4 days in a row have all been over 2 million passengers in the U.S. We had talked about when will the airspace get crowded again? When will the people actually start flying like they were before the pandemic? So I thought this was a very encouraging number to see that people are actually flying around again. Now, I say that with a quick caveat that I'm hearing of a lot of people. I think Alan Dershowitz was on the news last week, and he was saying that he didn't want to fly unless he could verify that everybody on the plane had been vaccinated. If they hadn't been vaccinated, they've been tested in the last X amount of time to ensure that they don't have COVID, because he didn't want to fly with anyone that was any risk. So this news coming out with, airlines and how they're doing so much better, it's also sprinkled in with the news that this might be short-lived. Now, I hope not. Based on what I'm seeing from people, they're trying to. There were some people that tried to relitigate this mask mandate, and there was a lot of pushback. So I don't know. I can't say for sure, but I feel like people aren't wanting to go back under those rules, and that might be good news. That might be a good omen for the airline industry as a whole. But for now, it's good news to see these numbers up.
Yeah, so it's great news, and if you're thinking about jet fuel demand and how that impacts the industry, it's but there you go, two prong. So the first prong is we need to get those numbers back up. Okay, now here's the other part: is that for jet fuel demand, most of that demand comes on the long international flights, and those really, to my knowledge, aren't where they're supposed to be. So from a demand perspective, it's good to see people are willing to fly. From a actual drain on storage, you want those long international flights up and going. And I still think we're a little bit off before we get back to there. Again, that's going to presume that we kind of have a standard COVID, whatever that looks like, policy where people understand if I go to country X, I can get back. And and so until we kind of get there, I think you're going to see that lag some. But the fact that you're seeing these numbers of people going through going through means that they're fine with wearing the mask for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. And so that would be good. That's a good sign that the other things about the economy, because think about it. If you're on the bird, with that mask, that's about as miserable as it gets. You can't take it off. You're stuck on a plane, crying babies, terrible food. That's the worst. That's one of the worst spots to be on the bird. I mean, to be on with the mask, because it's long. Like I've done the Amtrak with the mask on last year, and it wasn't too bad. It's kind of comfortable. Got a little space. You get up, kind of walk around. People look like you're crazy. On the bird, man, it's just a little different. I don't like
packed in there.
Yeah, you're packed in there with the mask on, and they come by and look at you like, is that below the nose? Let me see here. Let's pull it up. And so, you get your drink, you got to sip it and put the mask back on. So, depends on the flight, the flight attendant. But anyways, so yeah, good. It is a good sign though. It's a good sign that people want to get out, want to get around. And to your point about Dershowitz, who's concerned, if you're flying around with the mask on, set aside what you think about what the mask can and can't do. People believe that it's either worth the trouble or does the mask work, right? So whatever combination of two, but that's a positive sign for economic growth, that people think, okay, I can fly on the bird with the mask. That's great. I'll be safe. Or I want to suffer through with the mask on to fly. So either way, it's a good time for the economic rebound.
Awesome. Well, Ryan, we have one more piece here that I wanted to make note of. So we've been talking a little bit about inflation. So there's a report that came out about commodity inflation. Heineken. So basically, they're the world's second largest brewer. They said that they've been experiencing some inflationary pressures, and they said it's worse now than it's been at any point in the past 10 years. And they said that it's primarily circulating around aluminum prices and freight costs, that those prices have been going up. And it is, so what we're going to see now is anything using aluminum, anything that requires freight, or you're going to see these prices start to go up even more than what they have so far. So keep an eye on the Heineken prices. Let's see what they do, because they're going to have to make these margins up. And I think this is one of the issues that we're seeing, and we're going to continue to see, especially when the President Biden, he had a deal where he was asked if I think printing another 5 to 6 trillion this year will exacerbate this inflation problem, because even the most liberal people in the world know right now inflation is becoming a problem, and so they see it. And when they asked him about it, he said that printing all this money was actually going to decrease inflation, reduce inflation, is what he said, which is an absolutely idiotic statement. It really is. This is about as dumb as you could get in terms of what you're going to expect. So basically, our government's policy on dealing with inflation is to print $6 trillion more dollars. So if the prices are going up with aluminum and freight right now, we're about to make this thing get a lot worse, I think. So,
well, hold on. Before you go any further, two things. One, what happened to Heineken beer? Remember, they were like the talk of the town. Guys, been what, a decade or
yeah,
they were on all the commercials, and I don't know what happened to Heineken, but RIP Heineken. Or I guess they're still around. But the second thing is, listen to me, Joe, hear me out. You can print another 5 to 6 trillion, and I won't criticize you if you just give me 15 million tax free or 30 million with taxes. You can, 30 million I pay the taxes, 15 million tax free. I'm happy either way. This Ryan at warroommedia.com. We'll get the wire instructions taken care of. I mean, like, what would I care if I'm getting 15 million, right?
Yeah.
So, so Joe, if you want to hook your boy up, I'll endorse you, even though you're not running in 2024. I'll endorse you in 2024. So that's the kind of guy I am. How do you get 15 million out of this? Because if they do print another 5 trillion, giving me 15 million, who does that hurt? No one. Not a single soul is hurt by that.
Yeah. I mean, why do they give you? I mean, why don't you give everybody 15 million? I mean, everybody's good at that point. So we're.
It feels like there's some kind of economic principle in there that.
yeah, something.
It feels like something doesn't work there.
A little fishy here.
A little fishy, but so let's start with me. Give me the money, and then we'll figure out how many more people we can afford to give it to.
I have 132,000 acres before you can finish this episode. You wouldn't be able to get it back, baby. It'd be gone. Inflate it.
Oh! Speaking of land, so there's a guy that's running to primary Abbott.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So I'm trying to talk to him, but anyways, he is saying, and we'll see here. This is what politicians always say. He's saying that if he wins, he's going to remove the property tax.
He got my vote.
Endorsed.
Yeah. Let's do this.
He had to be sold at remove.
Like the FBI agent said at January 6th. Let's do this.
Yeah. He's trying to get us in trouble always.
Yeah. That's a joke.
It's a joke, people. The comedy podcast, lighten up. Yeah, I mean, think about that. Remove the property tax. That'd be pretty nice.
Yeah, that would be fantastic, man. I'm actually a little worried about it here in Texas, man, because property taxes are not something to play with, and inflation is hitting the real estate market right now pretty severely. That is so. Anyway, I was talking to a lady last week at church, and she said, like her value of her home is going up. She has no interest in selling, and she hates to see values going up. She's like, I got to pay more in taxes. So she didn't want to do it. And she's retired. She has living on a fixed income, and
Oh yeah.
these inflationary, prices are detrimental to her ability to, survive. So there's all these other aspects that a lot of people don't think about with this stuff.
Yeah. So the guy's name is Don Huffines, Huffines, Huffines. And I think Rand Paul endorsed him. So for all you left-leaning folks, that means that you definitely won't be voting for him. For any of you libertarians like myself, you'll give him a long look. So anyways, remove the property tax. That would be fantastic idea. So anyways, all right, Josh. Sorry to get us derailed on that with your FBI tinfoil hat conspiracy theory.
All right. So we have a couple of articles for the roundup. We'll run through these real quick, and I think we'll be able to wrap it up today. So first one, drilling activity continues to climb in the Permian Basin. So activity's up. I know the rig count was down by 3. So it's at 488. So it's dropped 3 rigs, but production in general is up. Next article, ExxonMobil 2021 earnings recap. So we're going to just pop this in the show notes here if you want to go in and take a look at it. We've kind of talked a little bit about Chevron and Exxon, but this goes a little bit more detail, specifically with Exxon. Endeavor Energy. We had a guy from Endeavor come on a couple months ago. So Endeavor Energy Resources Permian Basin package. They retain EnergyNet for the sale of a Permian Basin package comprising operations in 20 wells in Schleicher County. I may have been able to pronounce that right, but take a look at it for something that you're interested in. 20 wells, 80% working interest. Anyway, take a look at it. This is a Hart Energy article. We'll pop that in the show notes. Grenadier Energy that targets unconventional horizontal opportunities. So company you might want to look into if you're tracking some of this stuff. And last but not least, Ryan, Oil Search Santos close to a deal to create top 20 global oil firm. I thought this was an interesting article. Take a look at it. I'm not sure if they'll actually get this thing through, but it's an interesting read for sure. And with that, Ryan, I think that's it, man. That's all I got for today.
I think my kids are fired up back there. I think you missed about 4 words in there. I won't tell you which ones. We'll let the listeners roast you because you hadn't had a good Vaca Muerta moment in a long time.
Vaca Muerta. Hey, man, look, this is international stuff here, man. I'm just a southern moron trying to pronounce words from all over the world.
All right, folks. Inside the War Room this week, I have on a handful of folks. And Josh, you mentioned anything about this. So I have on the former founder of the Tea Party coming on this week. So that should be interesting. Be sure to check out Inside the War Room. And with that, until next time. We also have Brittany Franklin with Sky High for my kids are going nuts in there. Brittany Franklin with Sky High for Kids. And so we'll play a part of that on this show next week. With that being said, until next time, keep climbing.